I'm asking you to be a little bit, just a little bit open to sharing today, because I want you to think about and tell the person next to you, so hopefully they love you, and if someone tells you a story, laugh or not appropriately, of that one dumb thing that your name gets put next to. I'll give you an example. One day after my mum and dad got married, the car broke down. And I said to my dad, well, when are you going to take it to the mechanic? And my mother and my father, my dad, laughed. And I'm like, what? And they laughed and laughed. And apparently, I did not know this, my dad, before he was a pastor, was a mechanic. But no one had told me. And now every time something goes wrong with my car or their car or any car, they're like, oh, we'll have to take it to a mechanic. Ha, 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 Shelley. And I'm like, I was tiny. Tiny. At my old church at Blockhouse Bay, they know my love of fire, and there was one Sunday when we were trying to be all like doing something awesome and make a little bit of ambiance, and we can't have fires in the church. No. So we got a brazier and put some candles in it, not realizing that the candles melt down and it just becomes a pool of hot melting wax. And as the pastor, Kelly, my pastoral friend, was praying from the front, all we could hear was this pop, 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 pop. And then there was a small freak out as we're like, this is bad, we need to take it out of the church. So if you ask my parents, it's the mechanic story. If you ask Blockhouse Bay people, and there's a few of them here today, probably the fire story would be one of the things I'm known for there. Or there was a sermon that I did about bacon. It was actually about Jesus, but only people remember about bacon, because I said I put tomato sauce on my bacon sandwich, and all of a sudden half the church were like, sinner. So what is that dumb thing that your name is attached to? That story that will go down in history. Perhaps that picture was shown at your 21st. If you can't remember your 21st, tell each other. So we've all learned a little bit more about each other. I think there has to be a general promise, though, that any information that you've heard now cannot be used against the person. They might be already pre-traumatized by their name being attached to a joke about a mechanic. Now, as we think about king and kingdom, how we live in a world that is this world but also belongs to God, there is a story that gets pulled up, and I feel sorry for one of the main characters because it seems like she just did one thing, and she's perpetually known as the sister that did the wrong thing. I am the little sister who perpetually broke things, so I know the vibe of being the sister who does the wrong things and the stigma that can sit on you when you feel like that. So if you look at our photos, there's Jesus and two women, and he's kind of looking graciously at one of them, and the other one's like looking at him, and he's not even looking at her. Or the little drawing, once again, there's a sister sitting down, woman sitting down, a kind of sister like going, hey, and Jesus is not even looking at the one standing up. If we go again, catch the eye lines. So Lazarus, Jesus, looking at Mary, and I kind of think that Martha's got a bit of side-eye, to be honest. If you don't know what side-eye is, it's like... Now, I don't know if it's true, if I'm reading into it, or if it's just the style of the painting. You can come up with your own. But I feel sorry for Martha. She did one thing. And this is like the one story that she gets from, don't be Martha, be a Mary. You're like, cool, thanks. Because at first glance, this story seems like Jesus is rebuking Martha. If you look at all the paintings, that's what it seems to be so. But please turn to Luke 10 and 38. We're going to look at this a little bit more. So Luke 10:38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he had said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came up to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed in order, and indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Great. Martha. And at first glance, as I said, it does seem like Jesus is after Martha. She's come to him with her problem, which is the good thing to do, and said, "Help me." She's not doing anything. And he replies, "Why are you upset about these things? Why are you upset?" And she's like, "Because you are at my house. You are Jesus who's been wandering around doing miracles. You are my friend, my sister's friend, my brother's friend." There's a story about that later. "Jesus, you are at my house and you bring people with you because you go nowhere quietly," because he didn't. "You, Jesus, are at my house. It is my job to do these things. You need to food. Your disciples smell really bad, so I'm trying to work that out. There are things I have to do. You are at my house." And my sister, she's just sitting there. Martha is being the good, responsible sister, and it feels like Mary is being the unhelpful, non-responsible, probably little sister. And she's getting away with it. This is not the answer that Martha wanted. She probably wanted Jesus to be like, "Hey, hang on just a minute. I'm just going to pause. Mary, can you just go and help your sister, please? Cut some onions, do some dishes." And we have to remember that this conversation that Jesus has, this very seemingly harsh rebuke, comes out of a relationship where they were known and loved by each other. And Jesus gets straight to the point, and I wonder how long it took her to get it, because she was so busy in work mode, in doing mode, in preparing mode, and being a good hostess mode. You can be upset about many things, and there are things that are needed, but actually only one. Jesus was addressing this. He was saying, "Martha, your problem is not that you are looking after your guests and your sister isn't. The problem isn't that you care for these people who have come into your house. That is not the problem. The problem wasn't the work that she was doing. It was the underlying worry and agitation that sat underneath it. The worry that perhaps she, as a good Jewish woman, would be known as one that failed her guests. Perhaps even she was concerned about her little sister, a woman sitting at the feet of the rabbi who'd come to visit, which was a place not for her. So maybe amongst all the busyness and all the jobs, Martha was still being the good sister going, "Hey, Mary, this is not the place for you. Get over here now." The problem wasn't that she was doing work and caring for and loving on. It was the underlying worry and agitation that sat under it that she was trying to control. And to be honest, surely this is familiar. And the agitations and the underlying worry that sits on all of us In all the things that we do, it is often our nearest and our dearest that bear the brunt of our anxiety, the brunt of our worries or our resentment or our irritation. You could probably ask any adult family which one of us is the favourite, and each child would have a different answer, and they would probably point their finger at the other one and go, "It's them." And then they would say, "Well, it's you." Because so often we do things, we work, whether it's with our hands for jobs or in our gardens or in the places of our family that live under our roof, or our place in our family that we come together for, or even in our church. We work, and the problem isn't the work. It is the worry and the agitation that sits underneath it. Perhaps if I don't do it, no one will. Well, we're a family. Perhaps if I don't do this, I have no value. If I can't put my hand to this thing like I did once, if I can't do it now, what am I known for? Perhaps it's worries about things in the future that we cannot control, like mortgages going up or children. Because it's not bad to worry about paying off your mortgage, nor is it bad to worry about your children. But the whir of it, those underlying agitations where we were doing things out of immense worry and anxiety and frustration about our place in the world, Jesus just says, "Come and sit with me." Because work is good, doing things is good, caring for people is good. Jesus himself talks about and serves his disciples at his Last Supper, and he commends. Condemn is not one you want to get wrong at a funeral. And he commends those who do the same. Working for, what we do with our hands and our time, how we care for our families and our neighbours and our communities and our neighbourhoods in the world is good. The problem isn't the work, it's the motivation underneath it. The thing that causes us to strive in areas. The story of Mary and Martha is an exchange between close friends. Mary loves and trusts Jesus. Martha loves and trusts Jesus. And Martha knows Jesus will do what Mary asks. So she goes to him and appeals to him for his help. But Mary is doing a good thing. And Jesus is doing a good thing with Martha, with her anxiety, where her worry is misplaced, where her care is actually control. Instead, he uses this moment not to call out Mary for sitting and resting and being in him, but to call Martha into deeper relationship, into deeper discipleship, into deeper understanding that her focus and her worth and her belonging is found not in what she does, but who she belongs to. And there are only 7 times in the Bible where God, being God, or Jesus, who is also God, uses a person's name twice. And they are profoundly significant moments. There is the calling of Abraham in Genesis, Jacob in Genesis, Moses in Exodus, Samuel in 1 Samuel, Simeon in Luke, Saul in Acts, and Martha in Luke 10. Among all these men that God called out for special purpose, Jesus also uses her name twice. Martha, come. Follow me, learn from me, find your place and your value in me, not in the busyness of your hands or the fret of your mind, of these things that you need to look after because it needs to be just so, because what if I don't, or what if I do, and then the train of things that follow out. Jesus is empowering her and giving pause to all the ahs that sit in her life, all the that motivate her hands and that can motivate ours. Now, rest assured, this is not a call to leave your jobs and come and sit at the feet of Jesus, because you still need to eat. But work is good, and rest is good. And there is a reason why we have a body among us, why this church family is called a family in a body, because, well, sometimes we need to rest and sometimes we need to work. And some of the that sit among us, it's very fun to do. If I don't do it, will somebody else? So I'll just keep doing it even though I'm tired. Well, actually, whose church is it? No, not mine. Don't point at me. Whose church is it? And who's going to work it out? And who's going to provide for it? And so sometimes the things that we do with our hands, the talents that we have, the places where we're being called, sometimes we just need to learn to rest, knowing that it is not ours to control, and knowing that ultimately it is God who will watch over and God who will look after. There are these verses, if we want to start talking about them, where it says that God looks after the sparrows, and if he can look after the sparrows, surely he can look after us. Or the beautiful flowers in the fields that are lovely, and then they wither and die. Well, if the flowers are provided for, surely we are too. And we know we are. There is this big thing called Jesus and the cross and salvation. And we're all like, yes, yes, I will rely on salvation. And yes, I will rely on God for the beautiful new life that he's given me and how he's calling me into heaven and homeward and into community. But no, I will not rely on him about that one thing, that worry that keeps me up in the middle of the night. So yes to salvation and yes to eternal life, but no, not that thing. No, that's mine. I'll fix that. I'll worry about that one. Thank you. We're all Martha. Let's be honest, even you men. But what is that agitation under our work? What is that thing that keeps us up in the night that we are unwilling to give to God and trust him in? Is it the striving that we do? And the care that we give to our own families, and the care we give to others, and the care we give to volunteering? Is it a call to do something out of love, or is it a call to do something out of worry? Because what happens if I don't? Forgetting that there is a big God of the universe who put things in order and gave us plans and rest. Because work is not bad. And rest is not bad. Rest is good. But the agitation to either work more than we need to be in places and do things and fix things, or to rest more than we should. We are called to be God's people at work with gifts and talents. So both have strength and value, and both can be used to avoid. What is the agitation to do or the avoidance of? that worries us. And it's funny, in a not really funny way, because God knows me, and there are these words that seem to follow me around. John 15, you might know. This is a sermon that was preached at my induction at Blockhouse Bay Baptist Church. It was presented by different preachers who visited the church there during Jubilee. Reti reminded me of it at my induction here, and I have this reminder from a talented friend up on my wall. John 15, I am the vine and you are the branches. And apart from me, you can do nothing. I'm going to read a little bit more of that passage. Because now and again we get our hearts out of whack. And in our priorities of either too much work or of too much of nothing, we start to place our value in those things. We keep trying to work on ourselves. But Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Now remain in me. As I remain in you, no branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. And neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. And apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers, and such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burnt. If you remain in me and in my words and remain in them, ask anything that you wish for, which is not lotto numbers or Ferraris, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you will bear much fruit and showing yourselves to be my disciples. Verse 9, as the Father has loved me, so I loved, he was talking to disciples, you. Now remain in my love. Jesus knows the hearts of his disciples and their freakouts. Peter, we know, so willing to show he is so good for Jesus and so life-changed. And yet he says to them, stay with me. Stay in my love. Stay in my teachings. And he talks about it in this language that everyone knows about. Everyone knows about wine. Not flash wine, but just wine we need to drink every day because it's the good stuff. He talks about bearing fruit. And about how a branch can't do it by itself. And I'm no gardener, so let's just stop there. You all know how that works. You can't put a dead tree in the ground and be like, hey, it's going to grow apples. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. And he keeps saying it. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you. He keeps saying it. Remain in me. Not in the glory of the works of your own hands. Not in the fret of if I don't, who will. Just remain in me. Find your home in me. Find your hope in me. Find your value and your name. And as you do that, you will produce much fruit. Not through your effort, but because you're connected to me. The instructions from Jesus' mouth is not to strive, but to rest. Not to strive to be good. Not to strive not to sin, not to strive to work to hold my value in, to simply have value, knowing that you are loved and belonged. not to fix or to strain to produce, not to be measured by anything else ultimately, but by this thing that matters, that you are joined into the vine. Being joined, being belonged, and belonging to. And remain in my love. It is a call and a reminder that God is enough and that he is trustworthy. And that while we are called to do things with our hands and with our time and our minds and our gifts and our talents, ultimately he is in control. I said it's funny that this verse seems to follow me around. So maybe the sermon is for me, not for you, but I'm sure even then it might be helpful. Those sermons at Blockhouse Bay came at a time of Jubilee when we invited other churches to come and minister to us. And these churches unknowingly spoke this word to that church. And in that month, I got a concussion. I fell down the back steps of my house because there was chocolate in my car. I had done some exercise, had a shower, got into my pajamas, went, oh, there's chocolate in my car. I think, because I actually do not know, I think I slipped on the way down because I woke up a little bit cold and went to bed and woke up the next morning with grass in my bed. I honestly can't remember. But as that time came for the other churches to come and minister to Blockhouse Bay, as to have rest in this time of Jubilee, to sit down and just sit and hear from God rather than do the Sunday school and do the music and do the worship and do the youth group and do the washing. Do. We were trusting God that he would fill us and fulfill us in this time. But it was actually me, the pastor at the back, going, I don't like this. And funny enough, it was me that got concussion and fell down the stairs and went to the doctor, and they asked me useful questions like, are you more or less tired? More or less tired. How are you? Are you more or less grumpy? I'm like, well, what do you think? And she's like, tick. And for more than a month, for more than this time that these other churches came to minister to Blockhouse Bay, I could do nothing. I wasn't supposed to drive, but I did. I couldn't focus long enough to write sermons even if I wanted to or needed to. I could not regulate my emotions, so you can imagine what a fun ride that was for everybody else. I was a little bit too loud and a little bit too honest, and most of the time I turned up for work and they're like, just don't. Go home. And while it was a struggle for Blockhouse Bay to sit and do nothing, because as a church we are so used to doing things, we had to trust that God would be enough and provide for us, that our children would still learn something of him, that our church Sundays would still look like a service. There was a lesson for the pastor that it wasn't mine to control. Not the church, not the Sunday, not the people. And it's the same lesson that I have to learn here, and the same lesson that you have to learn in the places and with the people that you care about. Yes, do good work, but it is not yours to control. It is not yours to make so that it is sure, because ultimately it is God's work that he is doing, and we are simply asked to remain. So I'm going to read verse 9 again and keep going from John 15. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in me, remain in my love. And if you keep my commandments, see, we still have to do something. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remained in his love. I have told you this, that my joy may be complete, and that your joy may be complete. When we are doing what we are being told and sitting under the authority of our King and in his kingdom, we have joy that is complete rather than the rah of our brains, or the rah of our hands, or the rah of our worry. That your joy may be complete. My command is this: love one another as I have loved you. We still have work to do. And greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command. For I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know what his master's business is. We know what God's work is. Instead, I call you friends. We'd do almost anything for our friends. For everything that I have learned from my Father, I have been made known to you. We don't sit in this world clueless or in the dark. We sit knowing the ultimate authority of God. Not only how the story will end, but how the story is coming together as he brings fullness and goodness and love and mercy and welcome and connection into it. And it is not our job to have to go and figure out how to do those things, but to simply work with him as he does it. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you might go and bear fruit, this fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Do these verses rankle at you a bit? To remain, to sit, to be still, to let God control the things that actually him alone can control, because they rankle at me. They do. But they also release me. That this is God's church, not mine. I will love you and care for you and pray for you and work with you and possibly, maybe, be willing to lay down my life physically for you. Metaphorically, you know it's true, of course. Anytime, anywhere. But it is God's church. It is God's family that you have been gifted with, whether it's this family or your family. It is God's job in the place that he has given you. It is God's rest in the place that you need to sit down in. And he ultimately holds control. It releases me because it's not up to me in the end, because I really don't have too much control of anything. And there is this false narrative among us and among our world that says, if you don't, who will? Because it's all on you. But Jesus, this king and this kingdom that we live in, his kingdom we live in, says, it's not. It's not your work. It's my righteousness. If you look at John 15:3, you are already clean by the word I have spoken to you. We don't have to go out and work out our salvation, work out our sins. You guys see the picture of the polar bear that looks really, really white, and then you see him in the snow and he looks yellow? This is us trying to work out and trying to control the things that actually aren't ours. We're actually putting ourselves up above God as being the king, because this is my thing to fix, not mine to rest in or give away. So please still feed your children and your pets. Please still tell your friends and family that you love them. This is the command of Christ. Please be willing to lay down your life physically and metaphorically for one another. But note in this verse, in this passage with the God that we serve, it comes after this. After the sitting at Jesus' feet. After the fact that you know that the Father and Christ have this wonderful love, and that Christ and us have the same love. The verses to do and keep commands come after knowing that you are loved. and knowing that it is God's work to grow you, for you cannot grow on your own. There is a hand of a good gardener at work, and his kingdom is a great and flourishing green one. Last week, I asked you to think about the orientation of your heart and what you are working towards. And I asked you, rather than try and do and unidol those idols of your heart, simply look to Jesus, to praise him and worship him and see how big and good he is, and all those other things then fall away. Well, this week, in your journal or out loud or call it out in other people, give thanks. Give thanks to a big God who is so often at work for us and in us. In your journal out loud and call it out in others, I am so thankful for the good work I see God doing in you. In your journal, God, I am thankful that I can sit knowing that you ultimately are responsible for my whatever. God, thank you for my, which allows me to be and do your work. That is now my work, because you call me into it, not as a slave, but as a friend. We live in a new kingdom with a better king. One that says, don't toil, but rest. Knowing that I've got it. Let us pray. God, you are big and huge, vast beyond our understandings, more wonderful than we can imagine. The author and creator of life, of creation. Jesus, you are the head of this church. Jesus, you are the righteousness of us. And yet, we still try and do it for ourselves. These good gifts that you give us of mercy and frustration. Well, mercy, we turn to frustration. Or forgiveness as we still try and work it out in ourselves. But you say, just come and sit. Rest in the good gifts that I have given you. Rest knowing that you are loved. As the Father has loved me, Jesus, you say, this is how I love you. And God, you call us into this new way of living where we place things at your feet and in your hands, knowing that you are a good God and way big enough, so much more biggest than us, that we don't have to worry and worry. But we know and trusting that you are good. We trust you with these things, with our work and with our rest, as we are called into a new kingdom with you as our King. Amen.